I've got 3 different books that show how stories are structured, and I've got some simple questions that you can ask while reading to help children notice the beginning, middle and end of books. So when we talk about story structure, we often break it into 3 parts. The first is the beginning, which is the introduction to characters and the situation. The middle introduces the main events and the problem, if there is one, normally develops. And the end is where the problem is resolved or the story concludes. I'm going to start with a classic. We're going on a bear hunt. And this is a great book for teaching sequencing and retelling to younger children because it's got a very predictable structure. And so the beginning actually starts straight away in the family are going on a bear hunt, as it says in the title, and it goes straight into their first problem. And the predictable structure is there are lots and lots of problems. So you can see that the main events are happening. This is where the first problem develops. It goes through, and they're still going through all these problems until they get to the cave, which is where the next problem happens when they see the bear. And then when they see the bear, they run all the way home. And the story concludes, and the story, well, their problem resolves, but maybe not so much for the bear. The next book is Click, Clap, Moo, Cows That Type, and this book is great at showing how the middle of the story develops problems and negotiation. So the first problem is that Farmer Brown discovers that the cows have a typewriter, and it literally starts with Farmer Brown has a problem. And of course, in this book, it's not just Farmer Brown has a problem, the cows have a problem, which is what started Farmer Brown's problem. So this is introducing the situation of the cows wanting electric blankets and using the typewriter to start a negotiation with Farmer Brown. But this is when the main events and the problems develop because Farmer Brown refuses, and then the cows go on strike and refuse to give Farmer Brown milk, which obviously you can see Farmer Brown is not happy about. But this is great for showing students how a problem is not always just resolved with one action or one event, but can take some time to develop and solve that problem. The end for the cows is when they use duck to take another letter and to Farmer Brown, and this is when the cow's problem is resolved. But the story's not quite concluded there because the ducks then use the typewriter to get a diving board. The last book of the 3 I'm going to show you today is Last Stop on Market Street. Now this is very different from the other 2, and I wanted to show you a book that has beginning and middle ends, but more of a situational journey rather than a problem and a solution or very predictable steps in a story. CJ and his grandmother leave church, so this is the introduction to the characters, and already CJ is asking questions of his nana, which will lead into the rest of the story. The middle of the story is about CJ's curiosity and asking questions and observing the characters on the bus. The end is when they finally reach their destination on Market Street and ends with CJ and Nana volunteering at a soup kitchen. I have a few questions that I'm going to share with you that you can use with any book for retelling and sequencing. If you want more, visit my blog post about retelling and sequencing with picture books. I've got the link in the description. So, for example, you can ask simple questions like what happened at the beginning of the story, what events happen in the middle, to encourage your students to think about what are the most important events, because when you're retelling or you're sequencing, not every single event that happens in the book is important. How does the story end? Obviously very important. And then thinking about what changes happened for the character. And this can also help your students think about what the events were in the middle, because they need to think about what were the changes and why did the character change. So simple questions like that will help your students understand how stories are organised. If you want to use some worksheets or graphic organisers for your retelling, I have some examples, and I've used the book Pick the Pug to show you those examples. So you can use worksheets like this that you can use with any picture book. As you can see, you can just add your title, and there are all sorts of ways that you can help your students retell a story just by looking at the beginning, middle and end, but also looking at characters, setting, themes, topics, things like that, and obviously looking at the setting. Here are a few filled-in examples for Pick the Pug that you can see your students can just write, they could draw, or they could do a bit of both. So it's also great for differentiation. I will put a link to these, they only cost a few dollars, and you can use them with any book. So here's an example of sequencing, and we'll go to one of my favourite illustrations, which is this. And again, I've made these so they can be used for any book and also for differentiation depending on the abilities of your students in your class, but also you may move grade levels and you can take these with you. So there's all sorts of different designs. And again, here are two examples for Pick a Pug. This one's just done with illustrations, this one's with drawings and with text. And obviously for more able students, you may just want them to write. And as a little bonus, in the pack I also have some summarising worksheets, which can also help the children narrow down the events in a book before they do retelling and sequencing. So again, if you're interested in those, take a look in the description below or go to my website or my TBT shop. You can find them there.